The topic is subtracting a negative number. The essential question is, what should you remember when you subtract a negative number? So what I want you to do is I want you to keep your eyes peeled for when you see something like this. So if you see something like 2 minus a negative 3, or if you see something like this, 2 minus a negative 3. Now typically your textbook will put negative values inside parentheses, but I've seen them to where they're not in parentheses like that, okay? But just know that this, when you see this, is exactly like this, okay? The person just didn't take the time to put the little parentheses around that negative 3, okay? So when you see that, that means you're subtracting a negative number, subtracting a negative number, subtracting a negative number. Okay, when you subtract a negative number, it's going to reverse your direction on a number line. So, to kind of hopefully help you remember that, I thought up this inspirational quote. And I hope that it can help you remember which direction to go on a number line. So if you subtract negativity, so you're subtracting some negativity, you're moving in the right direction. Okay, so I call that inspirational because, you know, if you start just getting rid of any negativity you have toward anything, then you're going to start having like maybe more positive thoughts, okay? You'd go in the right direction toward positive, okay? So that's just a silly little quote that I kind of thought up that I thought related well with this. All right. So we've got some examples down here. I have the equation written right there. I do want you to model it with vectors, and I want you to write out this solution. But before we actually get into this, I want to remind you about this over here. Remember, when you see a positive or a negative symbol directly next to parentheses, you must, what do? You must multiply that symbol by every term inside the parentheses, okay? And that helps you remember this. When you subtract negativity, you're moving in the right direction. So let's go ahead and see right here. Look, we're subtracting a negativity. We got to go from the 2, you got to go to the right 3 units. But remember this that I've already taught you? Look, it'll help you do that. A negative times a negative 3 gives you a positive 3. So it's really 2 plus 3. Okay, so let's go ahead and model that with vectors real quick. Start at 0. Go to the right 2 units because that's a positive 2. So I'd end up right there. And look, I got to go to the right 3 more because that's a positive 3. Look, we subtracted negativity. We're going to go to the right direction. So from there, we're going to go 3 more units to the right. 1, 2, and 3. So my answer to 2 minus a negative 3 is 5. Okay, the next problem. Oh, look, you have parentheses, and you have a symbol directly outside of it, so we're going to distribute it. 4. Okay, negative times a negative is a positive, so 4 plus 1. So my vector would go from 0 to 4. Sorry, my lines aren't very straight. Like, that one's really bad. And we're going to go to the right 1 more unit. So 4 minus a negative 1 is 5. Okay? Now, if there wasn't parentheses around it, you still do the same exact thing. So up here, you saw this right there. You'd still like multiply that. A negative times a negative 3 would be a positive. Okay? So this is really 2 plus 3. Like this, it's really 2 plus 3. Okay? But most of the time, again, in your textbook, they will segregate that negative 3 and put parentheses around it, just so you know. All right, look, this one right here. We got negative times a negative is a positive, so this is really 1/2 plus 5. Okay, so on my vectors, start at 0, do my vectors to 1/2 on my number line. Oh, that's bad too, okay? And I gotta go to the right 5 more units, okay? So here's a 1/2 a unit, here's another 1/2, so it's a whole. Keep doing that. And you should get, okay, another, and I go 1/2 more. There we go. Right there, 5 1/2. So 1/2 minus a -5 is 5.5. Okay, right here. Look, I see a parentheses with a symbol directly outside of it. A negative times a negative is a positive, so a negative times a -4 is a +4. So rewrite this. So -3 plus 4, start at 0, and instead of going to the right, we gotta go to the left because it's 3 units to the left. It shows me my direction. Okay, now I gotta go to the right 4 units. So from there, 1, 2, 3, 4. That places me at 1. Sorry, the arrow went a little bit crazy past it. I didn't mean that. So -3 minus a -4 is 1. Okay, look, parentheses again with the symbol directly in front of it uses that multiplication. I do the arrow just to remind myself. So -2, a negative times a -9 is a +9. So my vectors start at 0, go to the left 2 units because that's a -2. Now I gotta go to the right 9 units from that -2, okay? So 1, 2, 8, 9. So my solution is 7. -2 minus a -9 is a +7. Okay, this one right here. Oh, we got that same thing. We got to multiply. Negative times a negative is a positive, so negative times a -4 is a +4. Bring down my -1/2. So start at 0, go to the left because it's a -1/2. Right there. Now I got to go to the right 4 units. So half is a whole. There, and there's another half. Keep going. There we go. Would put me right there, right? 3.5. Okay, so -1/2 minus a -4 is a +3 1/2. For your summary, I want you to fill out this tic-tac-toe chart, and I want you to remember this tool only works for when you're multiplying or dividing, okay? It's not for adding or subtracting. And again, going across this way is multiplication. Reading it as columns, starting from the top, going down is division, okay? So fill it out just because it will help you remember if your answer will be positive or negative whenever you're multiplying or dividing with positive and negative numbers. So here's another way to think about subtracting a negative number. So when subtracting a negative is right here. When you see subtracting a negative, when you see that, here's another way you can think of it. Let's say you owe someone $5. So you owe someone $5, and how can you represent that debt using a number? I would represent it using a -5. Okay? Because you owe them $5. You have a -5 value. So I'm going to put in parentheses that you would owe somebody $5. That's why it's a -5. Okay, now if you paid that person back $2, now you've subtracted some of your debt. So before you used to owe them $5 and you've paid them back $2. So you would have subtracted some of your debt. Let's write that down. Okay, you would have subtracted some debt because you gave them back some of what you originally owed them. You originally owed them $5. You gave them back 2 of those dollars. And how can you represent this scenario with an expression? So I'm going to go ahead and show you that. You had owed them $5. That represents the -5 represents how much you owed them. And here's the weird part. You're subtracting some of that debt. Okay? You're paying back 2 of that debt, $2 of that debt, okay? And this is an expression. You'll see there's no equal sign. So let's go ahead and model this right there. What that right there, this is you subtracted. You're subtracting $2 of your debt. Okay? So after paying them back $2 of the amount you originally owed them, think of how much you still owe them and represent that using a number. So I want you to think about that. You owed them $5. You gave them back 2 of the dollars. So how much do you still owe them, and how can you represent that with a number? I would represent it with this number right here, because now you owe them now you only owe them $3 instead of 5. Okay, and it's negative because you owe them that. So now here's an equation that models this entire situation. We're also going to label the parts also. Okay, so here we go. You had originally owed them $5, so that's why you have -5. And then you're going to subtract some of that debt because you're paying them back $2. So you get rid of that $2, some of the $2 of that debt. Okay, and -5 minus a -2 would give you a value of -3 as your solution. So let's go ahead and label that to make sure you're understanding this. So this -5 was your original debt. Okay, right here is where you're subtracting $2 of that debt because you paid back $2. Okay, and this -3 right there represents that you still owe them this amount. So you still owe them the $3. That's why it's negative. That says them this amount. Okay, and lastly, we need to make sure you model this on a number line, model this equation using vectors. Okay, so start at 0. You had owed them $5, so you're going to go to the left 5, putting you at -5. And you're subtracting $2 of that debt. You're subtracting some debt. You're subtracting a negative, okay? And when you have that situation right there, you're going to move to the right. And you're going to move to the right 2 units. Okay? So you'll see now that you'd owe $3, represented by that -3. Okay? So here's that equation. Here it is modeled. Okay, right now take a moment, in your own words, describe how to subtract negative numbers. Okay, have a good day.